Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about this idea of efficiency and how efficiency can be achieved in a market situation. Now, just a quick recap. We define efficiency in terms of efficient allocation of resources. In previous chapters, we have argued that our resources are limited, so we need to find the most efficient possible utilization of our resources, and that efficiency can be achieved in two dimensions. So we usually talk about efficiency in two dimensions. One is what we call allocative efficiency, which is sort of efficiency from an allocation perspective. If we look at the definition, allocative efficiency is a situation in which the goods and services produced are those that people value most highly, which in simple term means that the resources will be achieving allocative efficiency when you produce goods that has the highest value to the society. So that's from the societal perspective. Now, the other aspect of efficiency is this productive efficiency, which is much simpler in the sense that we can achieve productive efficiency when goods and services are produced at the lowest possible cost. So productive efficiency is sort of like the production aspect of this efficiency, where we are going to be achieving efficiency by achieving cost minimization. Both of these concepts are important in economics, and what we're going to do now is try to get an idea about how we can represent this idea of efficiency in our economics courses by using some newly developed economic theories, and then we are going to also see how we can quantify this concept of efficiency. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to introduce some new concepts, and the question that we are after is that how to achieve efficiency in a market. Now, you have to understand that the discussion of efficiency doesn't really need to be in the context of a market equilibrium or market outcome, but since we have already looked at efficiency separately, and also we have sort of looked at a market model, a general and natural question could always be asked as to why have we spent so much time on the market model. And another question that we regularly ask is, does the market help us to achieve economic efficiency? The answer to the last question is yes, as we are going to show in a minute that our market equilibrium, or the concepts that we have developed in our market model like the demand and supply, can capture this idea of efficiency and also can help the economy achieve efficiency by achieving market equilibrium. But before we do that, we need to first define the two critical concepts that really outline efficiency from the society's perspective and from the production perspective. The first concept that we're going to look at is called the marginal benefit. The marginal benefit, when you look at the definition, is straightforward. It says it is the benefit of buying some extra good. Now, what it means is that we can interpret marginal benefit in sort of two different ways. We can define marginal benefit in terms of what people give up to get a good, in terms of satisfaction. So let's say you have two goods that you can buy, and you are buying one of them, which means that you are literally giving up buying the other good. So that means when you are buying good A, you are giving up the satisfaction of buying good B. So marginal benefit really captures how much satisfaction you are giving up in terms of not buying the other good. Okay, so let's try to imagine this idea, and because sometimes we fail to understand the true nature of marginal benefit. So marginal benefit is a behavioral concept, which means that it is tied to our taste, our satisfaction, and whether we like a certain good or not. Let's imagine that we have a situation where we are buying, oranges, one of my favorite example, right? And we are buying oranges, so oranges are measured by the horizontal axis, and we are trying to measure marginal benefit by the vertical axis. Marginal benefit is actually the amount of satisfaction that you get by buying additional oranges. Okay, so now let's think about this. So imagine that you are buying the first orange of the month, right? You are very excited. You are looking at the orange for the first time, and you would say that one could argue that we get a lot of satisfaction from buying the first orange. Okay, so let's put some arbitrary number on this marginal benefit from buying the first orange, and let's call it, let's say, 5. That's an arbitrary number because we really do not know how to measure satisfaction. Imagine that you are buying the second orange. The question that I want to ask you is that would you be getting the same amount of satisfaction from buying the second orange? One could argue that probably you don't. Okay, so when you are buying the second orange, would you get the same satisfaction as you were getting when you were eating the first orange? Economic theory argues that you don't. As you buy more of something, as you consume more of something, your satisfaction from that good continues to go down. So we can argue that the marginal benefit, or how much you would be willing to give up for the second unit, is less than 5. As you move on and continue to buy more, the marginal benefit continues to go down. As a result, if you add those 2 points, your marginal benefit is a downward sloping curve. Okay, so let's go back and continue our discussion of marginal benefit and marginal cost. Now, one could argue that there is a strong relationship between marginal benefit and demand curve. If price is what people give up to get a good, then the demand curve for the good would be identical to the marginal product curve. So in the marginal product graph that we just drew, if price is being measured in the vertical axis, then our marginal benefit curve and our demand curve could show the same negative relationship between how much we buy and how much we give up for that good, right? It's the law of demand, as we have learned before. So therefore marginal benefit and demand curve are actually identical, or convey the same kind of information about economic efficiency. Let's look at an example which is consistent with the graphical illustration that we just looked at. The example is as follows. Let's read the question. The marginal benefit of the first hot dog consumed is, there is a gap, the marginal benefit of the fifth hot dog consumed. So as we have just shown that you get a higher marginal benefit from the first hot dog, so therefore I guess C could be the answer that you could use to fill up the gap. So C says greater than, so greater than the marginal benefit of the fifth hot dog consumed, so it makes sense. Okay, the next concept that we want to spend some time is this idea of marginal cost. So the marginal benefit was giving you an idea about the marginal benefit from a societal perspective, the value of the goods and services from the society's perspective, and marginal benefit really is interested in giving you an idea about the need of the society. Now, what the society can produce is going to be represented by this marginal cost curve. I want to sort of make a point that in the future, when we look at the cost structure of a firm and try to figure out how a firm maximizes their profit or minimizes their cost of production, we will also encounter another concept of marginal cost, which is slightly different from the marginal cost concept that we are looking at, although they are connected, but they are not entirely the same. The marginal cost concept that is relevant for the efficiency is the opportunity cost of producing one more good or services. It's a very straightforward definition. So you can think about marginal cost of a good being what goods you are giving up to produce that good. So marginal cost is all about production. Now, as we have learned before when we talked about production possibility frontier, that the slope of the production possibility frontier indicates the opportunity cost. So, and we have just learned that our marginal cost is also reflecting the same opportunity cost. Therefore, we can say that the slope of the production possibility frontier can help us to get an idea about opportunity cost, and therefore it can also give us an idea about marginal cost. Now, as opposed to the marginal benefit, our marginal cost graph is going to be a little bit different. So let's try to understand that. And how would the marginal cost graph look like? So imagine that you are measuring marginal cost, which is the cost of producing something, or the opportunity cost, and imagine that this is where horizontally you are measuring the good in question. So when you are producing one unit, you are probably giving up some resources to produce that. Let's call the marginal cost to be, let's say, 2. When you are producing more, let's say 2 units of output, you obviously have to give up more to produce that. So we can argue that as we produce more and more, our opportunity cost of producing those really increases. Hence, our marginal cost curve is upward sloping. Now, if you remember, when we had a similar discussion when we were talking about production possibility frontier, where we said that the slope of the production possibility frontier sort of increases as we produce more of something. If you remember that, then you can see that that idea is also connected with an upward sloping marginal cost curve, which also tells you that as you produce more, the opportunity cost of producing more increases. As a result, marginal cost curve is upward sloping. Okay, so let's go back to our discussion one more time. So our marginal cost curve. Our marginal cost curve, therefore, has two interpretations. First of all, it is the slope of the production possibility frontier. And also, just like we did it for the marginal benefit, we can argue that if price is a true reflection of the opportunity cost of producing something, then your supply curve from the market model could tell you the same information as your marginal cost curve. If price is the true reflection of opportunity cost, and marginal cost curve tells you that as quantity increases, opportunity cost increases, supply curve could convey the same information by pointing out that whenever prices go up, producers produce more. So we can therefore argue that marginal cost curve and supply curve give you identical information about the market and market efficiency. Let's look at a question, an example. So this is the example that we're looking at right now. The example is telling us that the marginal cost of a good or service A can be calculated from the marginal benefit of that good or service. Not true. Marginal cost and marginal benefit concepts are separate. They are coming from two sides of the market. Marginal benefit is giving us an idea about the society's value of the good, and marginal cost is telling us the cost of the opportunity cost of producing something. B decreases as more of the goods and services is being produced. That's also not true. Marginal cost actually goes up as you produce more. C can be derived from the production possibility frontier. Now that is true because production possibility frontier's slope at different levels of output is nothing but the marginal cost of that output. So C also is the correct answer for this example. Okay, so the next concept that we are now going to look at. So we have now looked at two parts of the efficiency debate, marginal benefit and marginal cost. And we are now gonna bring those two ideas together and see how we can find efficiency in our economy. So there are going to be alternative interpretation of how you find efficiency. To begin with, efficiency will be found where the marginal benefit and the marginal cost curves intersect each other. So if marginal benefit and marginal cost curves intersect each other, we will find an output level, and that output level will be the output level at which the society achieves efficiency. So remember that the intersection between marginal cost and marginal benefit tells you the output level at which the production is being taken place at the minimum possible cost, and the society is putting the highest possible value on that good. Okay, so that is so slightly illustrated in this idea. First of all, notice that productive efficiency is found all points on the production possibility frontier, and then allocative efficiency is found at the point on the PPF where marginal cost and marginal benefit curves intersect each other. So therefore, in equilibrium, when we marginal benefit and marginal cost curves intersects, we find economic efficiency. Okay, now what is important is to notice is that this same idea can be interpreted in a market setup. We can argue that if marginal benefit is represented by the demand curve and marginal cost is represented by the supply curve, then the intersection between the demand and the supply curve, which derives market equilibrium, is also socially efficient, economically efficient, meaning that market equilibrium can derive us the economic efficiency concept that we want to understand in this chapter. Okay, so that's important. We are now going to look at some examples as to that will sort of get us a better idea about how this economic efficiency is derived. Before we look at the question, let us try to understand that in the context of our model. Okay, so we want to go back to our drawing board again, and let us draw the marginal benefit and the marginal cost. So marginal cost is upward sloping, marginal benefit is downward sloping. At the intersection, we find the output level, which guarantees us, let's call it Q star, that guarantees economic efficiency. Let's try to understand this equilibrium concept. The best way to understand that Q star is indeed socially efficient, let us imagine output level which are not equal to Q star. First of all, let's imagine an output level such as Q1. Okay, so at Q1, notice that at Q1 output level, marginal benefit is here, marginal benefit is here, marginal cost is there. So you can see that at Q1 output level, marginal benefit is less than marginal cost, which means that when the society is producing Q1 amount of output, the cost of producing that output is greater than marginal benefit. Whenever the cost of producing something is greater than the benefit of producing that good, this is overproduction. Overproduction means a situation where the economy is producing more than it needs, and whenever we have overproduction, the signal is that output should go down. So whenever the economy is producing at Q1, the economy sends the signal that you need to reduce your production of goods and services. Okay. Let us now imagine an output level which is less than the equilibrium output level of Q star. Let's call it Q2. At Q2, notice that your marginal benefit is here and marginal cost is here, so you can see clearly that at Q2 output level your marginal benefit is actually greater than marginal cost. When marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, we call it underproduction, which means that the amount of output that the society needs is less than what is being produced. Whenever the marginal benefit of producing a good is higher than the marginal cost, it sends the signal that output in the economy should go up. So when the economy is producing at Q2, the economy is sending the signal that production should increase beyond Q2. So the interesting fact about Q star is that anytime the economy is left of Q star, like let's say Q2, or right of Q star like Q1, the economy's output level is never stable. It is never in equilibrium. At Q2, output is increasing. At Q1, output is going down. So in either cases, the economy does not really reach the equilibrium that ensures economic efficiency, and Q star is the only place where marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. When marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost, it automatically achieves allocative efficiency, and allocative efficiency along with this Q star output level tells you that if the economy indeed produces at Q star, it will be on the production possibility frontier, and that point on the production possibility frontier will ensure productive efficiency, and at the end of the day, the economic efficiency altogether, the whole package. Okay, let's now go back. We are going to illustrate this idea by an example, and let's look at the example. The example is talking about a situation where the marginal benefit of a slice of pizza exceeds the marginal cost. So this is marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. We have just seen that whenever we have a situation like that, it is telling us that out production should be, production should go up, right? So the correct answer is A, that more slices of pizzas should be produced. Okay, so that's that. Now let us, so now it's time to probably move to the most important concept of this discussion, and it is now we are going to try to understand efficiency in the context of the market model. Okay, before we try to connect the concept of efficiency with our market model, we need to develop some concepts that will help us to quantify this idea of efficiency. We are going to develop two concepts. One is called consumer surplus and the other one is called producer surplus, and we are going to use those to conceptualize and quantify our concept of efficiency. Now, as you have probably noticed by now, that efficiency is a concept that affects both the consumer and the producer. Consumer being the society that buys stuff, producer being part of the society that produces stuff. We have seen that efficiency is found where marginal benefit, which reflects the buyer side of the economy, intersects or is equal to the marginal cost, which represents the producer side of the economy. So consumer surplus and producer surplus will be another way to keep track of those changes in benefits and cost for the society. So what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the marginal benefit from a good or service minus the price you pay for it. So it's a very simple idea. The way to find marginal, consumer surplus is by finding the vertical distance between the demand curve and the market equilibrium price. And producer surplus is the price of the good minus the opportunity cost of producing it. So producer surplus is found by summing up the vertical distance between the supply curve and the market equilibrium price. So what does that mean? Let's move on to our board and try to draw them. So let's imagine that we have a market. Okay, market, and the market is composed of demand curve and supply curve. Please remember that demand curve is reflecting marginal benefit and supply curve is reflecting marginal cost. Imagine that the market equilibrium price is P star, market equilibrium quantity is Q star. Now I want to extend this so that we are sort of have a very concrete idea about producer surplus. So consumer surplus is the difference between the demand curve and the equilibrium price. So what does that mean? Let's try to understand consumer surplus from a societal perspective. Let's say there is a consumer who wants to buy Q1 units of output. According to his demand curve, our consumer was willing to pay, let's say, P1 price, but since the market is in equilibrium, he ends up paying just P star. So you can argue that the difference between P1 and P star is the benefit or surplus to our consumer. So for every output level between 0 and Q star, the area between the demand curve and the market equilibrium price captures the consumer surplus in this model. So our yellow upper triangle is called the consumer surplus. Okay, let's now focus on the producer slide. Now imagine that there is a producer who wants to produce Q1 units of output. Our producer, according to the marginal cost or supply curve, would have been willing to accept, let's say, P2 price, but the market really gives him P star, which means that if our producer produces Q1 output, our producer gets this surplus from the market, and that is a producer surplus. If we add up all these individual producer surplus for the output between 0 and Q star, we will get another triangle, which is the triangle is below the market equilibrium price and above the supply curve. So this is our producer surplus. Okay, so consumer surplus is the triangle between demand curve and price. Producer surplus is the triangle between the supply above the supply curve and below the market equilibrium price. Okay, now let us go back and try to understand how these two concepts can be used to find efficiency in the market model. It should be obvious that the equilibrium in the market where demand equals supply is also the point where marginal benefit equals the marginal cost, and hence market equilibrium should derive as the economic efficiency. But we want to be a little bit more formal. Formally, the way to find market equilibrium, market efficient outcome in the market is that we will find efficiency or market efficiency where the sum of the producer surplus and consumer surplus is maximum. Okay, this is where, as we will show in a minute, where the market is in equilibrium as well. So market being equilibrium and the sum of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus being maximum are identical concepts. So just to summarize, in our market the economy will be efficient where the market is in equilibrium. End of the story. Does that mean that the market is always in equilibrium, or does that mean that the market always guarantees the efficient allocation of resources? The answer is clearly no. We are now going to look at this so-called idea of market failures, which mainly results in economy not achieving efficiency. Okay, we want to look at this market failure from a more generic perspective. We are going to say that market failures will occur when when there is either overproduction or underproduction, which means that whenever the economy is either producing too little or too much, the economy is not efficient. Obviously, this is going to be true when marginal cost and marginal benefit are not equal. And as we are going to show in a minute, this is also the case where the sum of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus is not maximized. In order to show the market failure, we are going to develop this new idea called deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is the decrease in total surplus that results from an inefficient under or overproduction. This is a loss in consumer surplus and producer surplus or both, which is not borne by the society, and that's why this is a loss from the society's perspective. It's a social loss. Let's understand this from a graphical perspective. I have included a graph in our discussion, and we want to understand them slowly. Let's imagine a situation where the economy is underproducing. So we are looking at figure A, where the efficient output should have been where the economy was producing 10 units of output and the price was 10. Somehow, which we're going to explain later on, the economy produces 5 units. 5 units of output. So notice that if the economy was producing at 10 units, the total consumer surplus would have been this big triangle, right? But since the economy produces only 5 units, the society kind of loses this shaded area of consumer surplus. Okay? That's one part of the loss from the society. Again, on the producer side, if the economy was at equilibrium and the market was producing 10 units of output, the lower triangle is the total producer surplus that our producers would have been getting. But since there is an underproduction, our producers, so this is consumer surplus loss, and this area is the loss of producer surplus that the producers lose as a result of this underproduction. So when we add the loss in consumer surplus and the loss in producer surplus, we get this shaded area which is called the deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is the loss in consumer surplus plus the loss in producer surplus that arises from some kind of inefficient allocation of resources, and therefore the area of this shaded area, deadweight loss, measures the loss of the society. So this was a case where the economy was producing too little. Now we are going to look at something called overproduction, where the economy produces too much. So we are now looking at figure number B, where the economy efficient allocation production would have been 10, but for some reason the economy produces 15. So when the economy produces 15, we have to measure the loss in consumer surplus. Well, but there is no loss in consumer surplus here. There is mainly a loss in producer surplus, right? Because the The loss in producer surplus is, so notice if you remember the previous figure, the deadweight loss was the loss between the demand curve and the supply curve, and here the deadweight loss is also the area triangle between the demand curve and supply curve at that output level. So this is the deadweight loss, and you can calculate the value area of that deadweight loss. So therefore in both overproduction and underproduction, we have this deadweight loss problem that really quantifies the concept of efficiency in our market. Okay, so this is an important concept, and now we are gonna sort of talk a little bit about the various sources of market failure. So what we are mainly talking about here is that what are the various ways the market can underproduce or overproduce that results in market failures. Well, the first candidate is obviously price and quantity regulations, where government sometimes controls the price, puts a price ceiling or price floor. Government sometimes regulates the quantity of some goods, like some illicit drug or something that the government wants to control. These can lead to overproduction and underproduction, and hence create inefficiency and market failures. Externalities are another major source of economic inefficiency. Externality happens when an action taken by you has an undue effect on actions taken by other people, for which neither you nor the other person pays or receives any kind of payment. So this is like something that you receive for free, for which you don't pay anything. So externality is a very serious economic problem. One of the classic example of externality is that you ride your car and then you emit polluting gas that pollutes the air, for which you don't pay anything. Now you can argue that whenever there is externality such as air pollution, since the government cannot perfectly price this pollution, there is overproduction of air pollution, and as a result the air is really polluted. I mean, China's Shanghai city is a classic example of how serious air pollution and externality could be. Another classic example of market failure is monopoly, where a single firm controls the production of goods and services in an economy, and thereby they can decide whether they want to produce more or too much or too little, depending on how they want to exploit the market conditions. Taxes and subsidies imposed by the government could also create overproduction and underproduction system, and therefore lead to market failures. Public goods and common resources. Public goods are goods that everyone can use, such as a national highway. Common resources could be resources that all of us can use, like again, a pond between a couple of villages. Anytime when you have a public good for which you don't pay a direct price, or common resources which really does not belong to anyone specific, we can have overutilization of those goods, and that can lead to market failure. High transaction cost, the last one and probably the most unobvious reason why market can fail. Imagine the production of electricity, which has very high transaction cost, meaning that it takes a lot of cost to really set up the production. When you produce electricity and there is no price support by the government, it will be very difficult to produce sufficient electricity to meet the demand of everyone in the economy. So as a result of high transaction cost, production of electricity might be underproduced, and that can lead to market failure as well. In the future, we are going to again come back to some of these ideas again in the context of government, and then we are going to learn about market failures in greater detail. But now let me spend some time trying to show you the in the context of a problem as how you can literally calculate loss of consumer surplus and loss of producer surplus, and you can literally get a quantitative measurement of social welfare loss. The example that we're looking at is a classic one. Notice that this is a market equilibrium model. You have the demand curve, you have the supply curve. Remember, supply is marginal cost. You have the demand. Remember, this is marginal benefit. You can see clearly that the market equilibrium price is 12 and the market equilibrium quantity is 15. So imagine for the time being, so if you want to calculate the total consumer surplus and producer surplus at the market equilibrium, you can see that the total consumer surplus is the upper dark shaded area and total producer surplus is the lower lighted dark lightly shaded area. So the consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve above the market price. The producer surplus is the area above the supply curve below the market price. Okay, so you can calculate the area of the consumer surplus. As we know that consumer surplus is nothing but the area of A, where the area of a triangle is actually a triangle is half times height times base. So here notice that the height of the triangle is 24 minus 12, which is 12, and the base of the triangle is 1500 minus 0, which is 1500. If you plug in the numbers, you will see that the consumer surplus is 9000. Producer surplus is the area of the lower triangle where the base is 1500, as you can see, 1500, and the height is 12 minus 0, which is 12. When you plug in the numbers, you find that the producer surplus is also 9000. Suppose now, imagine that for some reason government intervenes and makes a decision, imposes the condition that only 500 units of output will be produced. So when 500 units of output will be produced, I want to draw a line to indicate that at 500 level of output, this will be the loss of consumer surplus from the consumer's perspective, and this area will be the loss of producer surplus. So this area is loss of producer surplus. So let's call this E and let's call this F. All you have to do is calculate the area of these two. Now notice that when we are trying to find out the loss of consumer surplus, this is also a triangle, and the area of the triangle is is found by finding the base and the height and the so the base is 1500 minus 500, which is 1000, and the height is 20 minus 12, which is 8. So when you plug in 8 and 1000, you get loss in consumer surplus to be 4000. So that's loss in consumer surplus. Similar to that, when you are looking at the loss in producer surplus, the loss in producer surplus is going to be at this this smaller rectangle in a triangle, where again the height is about 1000 and the base is 12 minus 4, which is 8. So the loss in producer surplus is also 4000. When you add the loss in producer surplus and not a loss in consumer surplus, you find that the loss in producer surplus plus loss in consumer surplus is about 8000, which is a fairly large number. And then that is the deadweight loss. So the deadweight loss basically is this big rectangle. Part of it is loss in consumer surplus and the part of it is loss in producer surplus. Okay, so that's it. I hope that this video lecture will be helpful for you to really look at this issue of efficiency and how we can talk about efficiency in the context of a market model. Thank you very much.